Well, good evening, everyone. My name is James Sanderson, if we have not met before. I'm the evangelism minister here at the Brown Street Church of Christ in Waxahachie, Texas. It's looking like we might get some rain tonight, and it's been a long couple of months. We got a lot of rain at the beginning of the year, of the summer, and then it just stopped. And so, praying for some rain tonight. So, I'm glad you're with us. We are in a series that we've started back in January on God's love story. And what it does is it's trying to connect all of the dots of the Old Testament and the New. Okay? Now, we started this series back then, and then we took a break for the summer, and now we're starting it up again. And so we are working chronologically through the Bible, and today we are going to discuss the story of David. Okay, and we're just going to see how all of this Bible just comes together, and we have to make sure that every piece connects to Jesus. Okay, so we got to make sure we're going to get a lesson on David. We're going to get a lesson that helps us in our lives today, and we're also going to get a lesson on Jesus. And we're going to try to do all of that in today's lesson. So let's get started today. So today's lesson is Broken Glory, the story of David. All right. Now, just a little advertisement here, but I've got a new website out, savingsouls.net. It works great on a computer. It doesn't work as good on the phone. So just beware, okay? And we're working on that. We're working the bugs out of it, but it looks really good on the computer. And the reason it looks so good is because my wife did it, all right, Amy? So she gets all the credit. But if you need to contact me in any way or see these videos or send other videos out, you can get a hold of me there. You can get a hold of me at the Brown Street Church of Christ. You can look at my videos on YouTube. My website will tell all about me. There's your advertisement. Okay, so we're connecting these dots, and we're going to start with Israel wanting a king. Okay, they want a king. So let's go back, and we're going to go back to 1 Samuel here. And we're going to look at this prophet named Samuel, and watch what happens here. It says in chapter 8, verse 4, it says, "Then all the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel at Ramah, and said to him, 'Look, you are old, and your sons don't walk in your ways. Now make us a king to judge us like all the nations.'" Now you see a problem here, don't you? Israel wants to be like all the nations. Why are we like that? Why are God's people like that? It's like we are being taken out of the world, but yet we spend so much time wanting to go back to the world. And we do. And you can even see the church doing this. Let's just be like all the other denominations, and let's do the same things that they do. Well, Israel is no different, okay? And that's what they wanted to do. So when we go down to verse 6 and 7, it says, "But this thing displeased Samuel, and they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' So Samuel prayed to the Lord." Now that's a good idea. Let's talk to God about this. Okay? This is what they want. But God, what are we going to do about this? They want a king. I'm the main prophet of this time. What do I tell them? So the Lord said to Samuel, down in verses 7 through 9, "Heed the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they've rejected me, that I should reign over them." Isn't that sad? Is that really what Israel's doing? It's like they're saying, "God, you're not good enough. You're not good enough to lead us. We've got to get somebody else in here." And so they're rejecting God. Now Samuel can take this personal, okay? Kind of like us as evangelists. We're going out and doing Bible studies, and people get upset or they don't like what the Bible says. But the argument's not with us. It's really with God. It has nothing to do with us. "So according to all the works which they have done since the day I have brought them out of Egypt, even to this day, that which they have forsaken me and served other gods, so they are doing to you also. Now therefore heed their voice, however, you shall solemnly forewarn them and show them the behavior of the king who will reign over them. It's not going to be good. Warn them. Tell them, oh, you want a king? But when you want a king, here's what's going to happen to you. There's going to be taxes. There's going to be this. There's going to be that. It's not going to go as well for you. But go ahead. Give them what they want. That's what God says. Sad story here, isn't it? So, guess what? Here comes the kings. And Israel starts getting kings. So here's the kings of Israel. So let's look at this little chart here, okay? So up here at the top, the first king was King Saul, then King David, and King Solomon. And during their reign, Israel was united. The 12 tribes of Israel, they were all connected. They all worked together, basically, and they were one nation, okay? But then what happened? King Solomon married a bunch of wives from other countries that brought in a bunch of other gods, and that nation split, okay? And then you had the kings to the south, which was Judah, and then you had the kings to the north, which was called Israel or Ephraim, okay? So here's the kings. Now, out of this first group, I'm going to say that out of the first three, two were good kings, okay? Out of the ones to the south, out of all these kings here, you're going to have 8 that were good. And when you get to the ones to the north, there are none that are good. So basically, you're going to get about 1 out of 4 kings that are good. So it's not often one comes by. Most of the time, these kings are not serving God, they're not obeying God, they're not following God. Okay? All right? But every once in a while, you get a good one. And that's going to bring us to King David. King David. Now let's look at King David. And we know what he's known for, a man after God's own heart. It says that in the Old Testament about him. And it also says that about him in the New Testament. Way after he's been dead for a long time, he was still known as the man after God's own heart. It's the only one in the Bible that's mentioned like that. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? So let's see why he was a man after God's own heart. Well, we're going over here to 1 Samuel 16, verse 13, and just look at these verses here. Look how powerful they are. The Spirit came on David with power. With power. Wow. Okay. 1 Samuel 16, 18, the Lord was with David. That's a good thing to have. Chapter 17, verse 32, let no one lose heart on the account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him. Now, here's David, and he's a younger boy, okay? I mean, well, he's probably a teenager. It's somewhere in the teens, okay, is the guess. And he's going to go up against Goliath, this Philistine, okay, this giant. So here's a teenager and a giant, right? Okay? And look how he talks. Don't let anybody, hey, army, don't lose heart. We got this, right? And then he says in verse 45, I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty. That's good wisdom, David. Good wisdom. And then he says, the day of the Lord will hand you over to me. Right? God gets all the credit, but Goliath, you're coming down. God's going to hand you over to me. The battle, verse 47, belongs to the Lord. God's getting the credit here. Good job, David. Chapter 18, verse 12, the Lord was with David. Continued after that. Chapter 18, verse 14, in everything he did with great success because the Lord was with him. God is blessing him and blessing the nation. Those two were walking together, David and God. And then in Psalm 63, verse 1, David wrote a lot of the Psalms. He says, earnestly I seek you. My soul thirsts for you, my body longs for you in a dry and barren land there where there is no water. No water. My soul seeks for you. Now, that's pretty impressive, isn't it? You can see God and David are close, and they're walking with each other, and they have this great relationship, and they're moving right along. But then, something happens. Something happens. There is a change in David's life. This good king of Israel. And that's going to bring us to this. Now, I want you to see where his fall starts. When you look at his wives, how many wives did David have? He has 7 here, okay? There's their names. I'm not even going to try to mispronounce them, okay? All right, so he's got 7 wives. He also has concubines, okay? All right, they're a lot like wives, okay? So there they are. There's all these women in his life. Now, I want you to see what Moses says about this. Now, Moses is going to be way before David, okay? Let's see, about 500 years before David, you're going to have Moses. And he is going to write about this. They haven't even got to the promised land yet. They haven't even got to Israel yet. And Moses is warning them, you know what, guys? One day you're going to want a king. Well, let me give you some instructions when you do. Okay? And let me give this king some instructions. So this is what he says. The king, moreover, must not acquire great numbers of horses for himself or make the people return to Egypt to get more of them. For the Lord has told you, you're not to go back that way again. Don't go back to Egypt. Okay? And that's a lot like us, right? We want to go back to our slavery and our slavery to sin, right? And God's telling them, don't go back. But then it says about this king, right? It's going to be in the future. It's kings in the future. He must not take many wives, or his heart will be led astray. His what? His heart. What was David known as? The man after God's own heart. His heart will be led astray. He must not accumulate large amounts of silver and gold. Wow. Here's Moses warning the kings are not supposed to take many wives. Well, guess what? How many wives has David got right now? 7. 7 wives. And then comes who? The story of Bathsheba. So we're not done yet. So now things are escalating. Let's see what happens. This is going to bring us to 2 Samuel chapter 11. Okay? Now watch what happens. It says in verse 1, it says, in the spring when kings went off to war. What are kings supposed to do in the spring? They're supposed to be out there with the army. Guess what? David's not out there with the army. He is in the wrong place. Okay? Have you ever been in the wrong place? Yes. Right here. Me. Yeah. Sure have. But David remained in Jerusalem. He didn't go out there. Verse 2 says, one evening David got up from his bed and walked around the roof of his palace. Do you think that David knows what he can see from the roof of his palace at night? Yeah. Yes, he does. Verse 2 says he saw a beautiful woman bathing. Okay? All right, so here he is. He's seeing this woman bathing. Here we go. Okay? Now remember, he's already going down this road. He didn't just get there on this day. He has been building this in his life. Okay? All right? Verse 3. David sent someone to find out about her. Oh boy, here we go. This isn't good. Verse 4, David sent messengers to get her. Bring her to me. I'm the king. She came to him, and he slept with her. There we go. There we go. See? It's building. Oh boy. And verse 5, she's pregnant. We've got a mess here, don't we? Okay? Have you, as a Christian, person who is walking with God, started out really well, ever got into an absolute mess? Yes. I've been there. Others, I'm sure, have. Well, the story's not over yet. Verse 6 says, David sent for Uriah the Hittite, Bathsheba's husband. So let's bring him off. Oh, and who is Uriah? Uriah is one of his mighty fighting men. He's out there fighting for David and for Israel. And he's one of the best. And this is who she's married to. And he calls him off the line, come see me. When he gets there in verse 8, go down to your house and wash your feet. Go see your wife. You can see the plan here, right? The plan is, well, you go home. You've been out to war. Go sleep with your wife. Then, hey, she's pregnant, and they'll think that's your kid, and everything will be great. Uriah didn't go home. He's like, how can I do that? How can I go when my men are out here fighting and stuff? I'm going to just sleep right at David's doorpost, right? I'm not going there. Well, this isn't working very good. So David's like, we better stay another day. You stay another day here with me. I got another plan. So David made Uriah drunk, verse 13. We'll get him drunk. Then he'll go home, sleep with his wife, and then he'll find out she's pregnant and think it's his kid, right? Oh boy, here we go. Verse 13, Uriah still didn't go home. He didn't go home. He didn't do this. Well, this isn't good. David says, my plan is not working here. So verse 15, put Uriah in the front of the line where the fighting is fiercest. Okay? Then withdraw from him so that he would be struck down. So what does David do? He literally writes this message to the commander. Okay? Puts it in Uriah's hand. Go take this to the commander. And this has your death warrant on it, Uriah. I'm telling him in this letter that is in your hand that when the army goes forward, okay, I'm going to have everybody else pull back, and you're going to be stuck there all by yourself in the front. All the arrows will come down, kill you, and you'll be dead. That's David's plan. Do you see how deep this is getting? And now Uriah is dead. Who killed him? David. And then Bathsheba becomes David's wife. Well, she's a widow, so we might as well get married. And oh boy. So, what do we got here? Well, we got here not being where you should be. We've got lust. We've got adultery. We've got tempting others to sin. Getting drunk, right? We've got cover-up. We've got lying. We've got murder. And then we're going to have a child born out of wedlock. Well, it was conceived out of wedlock. Huh. That's a mess, isn't it? That's David. That's where David was at. So what happened? What happened? We have a heart problem. The problem is with the heart. David, a man after God's own heart, David has a heart problem. That's what Moses said. So, is there hope at this point? Can there be hope in that? I mean, you look at that mess and you go, how do you fix that? How do you take all of these things and fix that? How do you do that? Well, let's see. While this year is going on, okay, now there's going to be a year, okay, and the reason I know this is before Nathan gets to him and confronts him of his sin, the child's going to live, right, going to be born, and then Nathan's going to come and say your child's going to die, okay. Well, that means that the child, it's been at least 9 months, probably a little bit more, so we're talking about a year here. Now, can you imagine what David went through during this year? Can you imagine the guilt? Can you imagine who knows? What are they going to say about me? What's going to happen to me? All of this is going through his mind. And David's going to write about that in Psalm 38. And I'm going to encourage you to go and read Psalm 38. And watch what he says here. He says, I am feeble and utterly crushed. I groan in anguish of heart. Of heart. Now, when you read this chapter, you're going to see that this guilt is so strong with David that you're going to see that it actually causes mental illness. And I got a question for you. Can guilt do that? Can guilt cause mental illness? The answer is yes. I remember reading an article years ago about people who are in mental institutions, and this one doctor felt like, with all his research, that about 75% of people in mental institutions are there because of guilt or mischanneled guilt. Really? Really? That's why they're there? That's what he said. And you read this chapter, and you're going to see this. I mean, can you imagine? Here's David. He's king, and people are bringing him people to talk to him day after day. Court cases, and hey, listen to this, and what happened here. And you can see this with Nathan. When Nathan comes in, he's going to present a situation, okay, of somebody getting their sheep stolen, okay. This is what David would listen to all day long. Have you ever seen people when you talk to them and they don't see you? They may be looking right in your eye and they are a million miles away. Their minds are gone. They are looking right straight through you. David's going to talk about that. Can you imagine people bringing these cases to him and David just stands there and doesn't utter a word? Because he's not there. Because of his guilt. It can cause physical pain also. Read this chapter. So, his heart is being pierced while this is going on. It's got to be a miserable, miserable time. Now we're going to move from Psalm 38 to Psalm 51. In Psalm 51, verse 17, it says, the sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart, O God, you will not despise. Is God really looking for the animal sacrifices? I mean, that's what he wants, but is that really what he's looking for? No, he's not. And David gets this. He gets this. He knows God wants more than that. He wants a broken spirit. He wants a broken and contrite heart. And that's where David is right now. He is on the upward swing because his heart is broken. He is humble before God. That is part of the process. That's what God's looking for. So then we go from there, of this broken and contrite heart, and then we move from there to Psalm 32. Now, I know they're not in order, but I believe that this is the last stage of this process. And we're going to go to Psalm 32. We're going to look at verse 11. And David says, "Rejoice in the Lord and be glad, you righteous. Sing, all you who are upright in heart." Let me, I got my Bible right here. Let's look over here at Psalm 32, and look at verse. I think it's like. Well, we'll just look at the beginning here. Psalm 32. There's a bunch of them here. It says in verse 3, he says, "When I kept silent, my bones wasted away, through my groaning all day long. For day and night your hand was heavy upon me. My strength was sapped as in the heat of summer." But here's the key. Then I acknowledged my sin to you, and I did not cover up my iniquity. I said, I will confess my transgression to the Lord. And then the NIV says, you forgave the guilt of my sin. The guilt. David is now coming clean. He's confessing. And that took place, we know, with Nathan. And then he writes this: "You righteous, sing, all you who are upright in heart." Can David be restored from all of that? I mean, how do you fix all of that? Is it possible? Is it possible to come out of that? Well, yes, because I see something here. I see a change in David. Even though he had all 7 of these wives, he took Bathsheba, number 8, but he never took another wife. He is changing the way that he has been living. He's not doing any more wives. And his concubines. Look what it says in 2 Samuel chapter 20, verse 3. When David returned to his palace in Jerusalem, he took the 10 concubines he had left to take care of the palace and put them in a house under guard. He provided for them, but did not lie with them. They were kept in confinement till the day of his death, living as widows. Now, David has a right to sleep with these concubines, but he is saying here, the text says he didn't do that. He's giving up that right. It looks like he is changing. So, he is taking no more concubines, and he's not sleeping with them. Very good. That's what is happening here in Psalm 51, verse 10. This is the most quoted verse that I quote to God in my prayers during the day, over and over again. This is the verse: "Create in me a pure heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me." Create in me a pure heart. A pure heart. That's the key. Change your heart. Change your heart. True repentance from the heart. That's how you fix messes like that. Now, is it possible? Is it possible to fix messes like this? Well, that depends. That depends what you do with your heart. Now remember, David in the book of Acts is said to be a man after God's own heart. That means after he died, buried for a lot of years, that's what he's known for. Wow. Conclusion. Here we have our beginning. And we're walking close with God, and it's just wonderful. But for some of us, we could have had a pretty major fall. Can we be restored? And the answer is, well, what is it? It's yes. Of course you can. Of course you can be restored. That's what the Bible is telling us here. Yes, you can. Let me just remind you of Jesus now. Now we're going to bring Jesus into this. Okay? I told you we were going to. How does Jesus connect all this? Well, this just fascinates me. You get your Bible and you open it and you are going to come to the New Testament. And your first page, your introduction of Jesus, let the writer introduce Jesus, Matthew, to us. How does he do it? Chapter 1, verse 3. Let's introduce Jesus. Judah, the father of Perez and Terah, whose mother was Tamar. Judah, Tamar. Do you know this story? So Judah had a son, and the son didn't give Tamar any children. Okay? That's not a good thing to happen back then. Well, he's dead now. Okay? So it's Judah, as the father, his job to take one of the other sons and give children to that wife. That was under the old law, under the Old Testament. Well, guess what? Judah's not doing that. Judah did it, but the son did not comply. And he was evil, and God took him out. Then there was another son, gave that son to her, to give her children, and he wouldn't comply, so God took him out. They were evil. So now there's nobody left. There's nobody to give Tamar any children, to carry on the line. So, what does Judah do? What does Tamar do? Well, Tamar one day poses as a prostitute so that she can be impregnated so she can carry on the line. Guess who's walking down the road? Judah. Judah's walking down the road, sees this woman who he thinks she's a prostitute, sleeps with her, she gets pregnant. From that child comes Jesus. Jesus? This is how you introduce Jesus to us? From that union, as sinful as it was, comes Jesus. But there's more. Verse 5. Salmon, the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab. Rahab? Who's Rahab? Well, she's a Gentile and a prostitute. She, from Boaz and Rahab, their union together, comes who? Jesus. Jesus. Boaz, the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth. Ruth, also a Gentile, right? And some other ways about her in her early years, comes Jesus. And then we run into verse 6. And Jesse, the father of David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Do you know who came from David and Bathsheba? Another son named Solomon, and from Solomon comes Jesus. Is this how you introduce Jesus to the world? Is this his family? We've got 2 prostitutes, 2 Gentiles, 2 adulterers. The results is Jesus. Jesus. He didn't even put murder in there. Jesus. You know what I see from that? I see God's grace. Because when you go to this Hall of Faith, chapter 11 of Hebrews, this is where all the great people of faith are at. David is on that list. Rahab is on that list. These people made that list. You know what? Could people like you and me who mess up really bad, could we make the list? Well, that depends. That depends if you change your heart. Create in me a pure heart, Lord. Now, this is just for extra. Okay? We're just about done. Let's tackle the subject of divorce for a minute. Let's think about this, okay? Here you have divorce. Now the question is, when this happens, and we know God doesn't want this, He didn't want adultery and murder and cover up and drunkenness and all the other things that happened with David. He doesn't want divorce either. He hates it. So how do you fix this when this happens? We know God doesn't want it, but it does happen, doesn't it? I want to just make a point here, since we're on this subject of the heart. When we look at Matthew 5 and Matthew 19 and Mark 10 and Luke 16, this is the verses that are used that really talk about the whole marriage, divorce, and remarriage subject. Lots of different ideas and theories and thoughts and do this and do that. There's all kinds in the church, in our denominational world, all kinds of different beliefs, and they just go on and on and on and on and on. There's literally hundreds of different thoughts about all this, and they all come from these verses here. But I want to make a point here. Do you know what word we find in all 5 in the context? The word heart. The word heart. The word heart. And the word heart. Isn't that interesting? What does that make divorce? Something that God does not want. It makes it a heart issue. That's what it is. So here's my question. How do you fix that? How do you fix divorce? Well, here it is. Change your heart. Stop the sin. Don't do that anymore. If you steal, how do you fix stealing? Change your heart. If you've murdered, how do you fix that? Take the body out of the grave and put him in the church pew? Everything's fine now? No. Change your heart. Change your heart. Matthew chapter 5, verse 8. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. We made a lot of messes in our lives. How do we fix them? Get a pure heart. Change your heart. Get the evil out of your heart. And I'm going to ask that you pray that I do that, and I'll pray that you do that. We look at these words here, right? The promise, propitiation, right? Jesus was the one promised. He's the propitiation. He's God's satisfaction. He's our Redeemer. He redeemed us. Redemption, justification, just as if we never sinned. Grace, forgiveness. This is all of this that Jesus gives us. All of this can only be accessed by a humbled heart. Only a humbled heart can receive or understand these blessings. It's the only way. If you want to connect all of those wonderful words of blessings right there, only a humble heart can get a hold of that. A pure heart will see God. I pray that we all will see God. And the key is to change your heart. I pray this lesson has helped you. I pray that it has been a blessing to you. You pray for me, and I'll pray for you. A bunch of broken, messed up people. If there's anything that we can do to help lead you to Christ, you give me a call. I'd love to help you.